Welcome to the Thriving Christian Artist, the podcast where we hope you connect with God to bust through the roadblocks that have held you back for years, create the work you love, and really live the life you know God created you to live as an artist in His kingdom. I'm Matt Thomas, your host. Let's get started. Well, hey, everybody, I'm so glad that you're with me on the podcast today. I've got one of my dearest friends from the longest time ever, Lynn Rinehart. Lynn, I'm so glad that you're with me today on the podcast.
I am so glad to be here. I can't believe we haven't done this before.
I know. We were saying earlier, I said, all of our conversations through the years are podcastable, so I don't know why we've not recorded something like this.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. When we have, gosh, we've known each other a long time, and we've kind of been on this creative journey together.
That's right. I've often said about you and Mike, Tanya and I always say this, that you were our friends in Atlanta that we didn't have to pray for, because we could just go out and eat Williamson Brothers barbecue and get a big old slice of pie and talk about nothing other than Georgia, Tennessee football and just love on each other. And we need friends like that, right?
Oh, we do. That is so, it's a sense of family. And every time
right.
I think the four of us get together, or you and I talk, or Tanya and I talk, and it's like we've been close because of who God is in us.
Yeah.
Not only that, but just like, I feel like you're a lost brother. Like, what happened?
I know.
Like, I've never had a brother. Like, now I have a brother.
That's right.
Right. It's a bond that it's a God thing,
That's right.
Like, we've just always connected.
Absolutely. We're going on probably close to 20 years of knowing each other, which is crazy. And I remember, as we began to get to know each other early on, we both knew that we were artists. I was in worship mostly at that time because I was leading worship in Atlanta, where you guys were there at our church and all that. And then slowly you began to really ramp up your work in fiber arts. I was kind of ramping up what I was doing in basketry and everything. And it's really been so neat to watch your journey evolve over the years, because I think all of us, you kind of think it's going to go one way, and then it goes a completely different way. And it's like, Lord, what are you doing? It's incredible.
Yeah. And it's like, you never predict what the Lord's going to do. Honestly, it's just, I mean, that's just a lesson in futility if you try to do that, I think. And for me, and it's funny that my other friends have noticed this, but I think it's all about the journey. Like, that has meant more to me in the last, I don't know, couple of years, where I've been like, no, you're right. It is all about the journey. It's how I choose to walk every day. It's what are the lessons I'm learning along the way. There's a goal and I want to get there, and that's kind of out there, but it's all about the journey for me.
That's right.
And how I'm processing what God's put before me, and the challenges or the struggles and the joys.
Yeah.
And the joys.
Yeah, absolutely. I was telling somebody the other day the story of how all of this started with,
praying in your basement. I remember that.
Exactly. Well, it was like you guys were such a core couple for us at that time in our journey of trying to hear what the Lord was saying and discern these crazy dreams that I had of raising up an army of artists and what that meant. And I think the thing I've always loved about you and Mike is like, we may not understand everything, but we're willing to go for it. And I think that's kind of this heart for the kingdom, that, Lord, we don't know what it's going to look like, but we're willing to step out there in the middle of it.
Well, and I think if we know what it's going to look like, we're deceived.
Right.
Like, because I promise you, in what we've walked through, like what I would have said to you 20 years ago is not where God is today. And God reminded me of this morning when I woke up, because I was like, what am I going to talk to Matt about? And I was like, I don't know, we'll just talk. But he reminded me that one day I was driving to Canton, Georgia. You had already moved, and I just had I had to call you. I had to call you and talk to you. And I remember calling you and talking to you and saying, you need to do videos and you need to record artists.
Right.
And I was like, where was that coming from? Because there was not YouTube then.
That's right.
There was not And it was like God just so came on me that I was like, you need to do this. And I remember calling you up going, you have to do this. And I think
okay.
and I think that's what you were like, okay. Like, all right, Lynn, I have no idea what you're talking about. And then now, I guess 10, 15 years later, we're like, oh, this is kind of what God meant, you know?
Exactly.
That's funny.
Well, I was thinking just as you were talking, both of us on our creative journey, I think, at least for me, and maybe you can echo this, but when the Lord began to speak to me about my creativity, I really only viewed it in the context of ministry and in the context of kind of overt Christian expression. I was wrestling, I remember in those early years with, God, am I supposed to plant a church for artists, or what does this burden to raise up an army of artists look like? And I remember struggling with the idea, well, God, my baskets, they're not Christian baskets, so what do I do with that? And I know that we've both struggled with those things over the years, and yet God's taken us both from that place really into the marketplace, into kind of this holistic expression of the kingdom. Talk a little bit about that journey for you, because you're in such a, we're going to talk about it in a little bit, but you're in such a wonderful place of influence now as a fiber artist who is leading other fiber artists and speaking into the lives of so many now on your YouTube channel and at conferences and things like that. But how did that evolution happen for you?
Well, I think as artists, we all walk through the discovery process from the standpoint of, I tried it all. I mean, seriously, I could walk through Michael's and go, yep, tried that, did that. I mean, there's not an aisle in Michael's that I haven't bought something from or, attempted that.
Right.
And it was, and it's fun. It's funny how God does this, but it was in 91, I was in grad school, and my aunt, who's this really neat lady, decided that she was a collector of experiences. Right? So she would stay at all the bed and breakfasts in the state of Illinois. She would go to all the presidential museums in the country so that she could say she experienced all those things.
Right.
So one of the things she wanted to experience was there was this new museum opening in Paducah, Kentucky, and there's this conference and she wanted to go to it. And I was actually in grad school in Southern Illinois, and I wanted to spend the day with my aunt and cousins. And so I skipped out on conversational analysis class. And I went to this conference, and it was the National Quilt Show at Paducah, which is one of the premier shows in the country even today.
Right.
And they were opening this National Quilt Museum, and it was the first time this quilt museum had been open. And I remember walking in that museum and going, oh my God, you can do this with fabric.
Wow.
And that was it for me. And my mother, I remember my mom saying to me, long time before she passed, but she said, when you found quilting, you didn't do anything else. She was like, you tried. I painted, I did ceramics, I did pottery, I didn't basket weave. I didn't do that, but I made candles. I draw everything. But when I found quilting, it was just like, that was, I don't know. And for me, there's so magical about quilting and dealing with fabric and what you can do with it and how it's, and like you, it's a creation that can be artistic as well as a comfort. It's useful.
Yeah, sure.
Like, not all my quilts you want to snuggle under because they've got so much thread in them. They're cardboard, but but they're useful. And like baskets, as much as they're beautiful, there's a use for them.
Right.
And I don't know. So I found this love of fiber, and I'm very tactile, and I think a lot of artists are, where I just have to touch things and how does that feel? And and fabric does that for me. Fabric and thread, just I'm obsessed by it. But
that's what I do.
I think that was kind of the start of the journey. And then we moved to Georgia, and I was like, I really want a sewing machine. So Mike bought me a sewing machine for an anniversary present, and I started I'm going to learn how to make a quilt. And, I'm blessed because God put me in an area where quilting is cherished. There's a bunch of amazing quilters in this area, and I was a sponge.
Right.
And I took every class I could take. I became friends with quilt store owners who were, big in the marketplace, and they took me under their wing. Then I went and did quilt appraisal classes. I'm a certified quilt appraiser, which was a 6-year process. I was like getting my doctorate in quilting, honestly. Right. It's crazy. So then it just became it just kept growing. I kept getting more knowledge about it. And then I met one of my dear, dear friends, my business partner, Pam Cobb. And we kind of looked at each other and said, we love talking about this. Well, what happened was we were helping promote the quilt show that our guild puts on every 2 years.
Right.
And we had gotten the idea of going downtown Woodstock, which is where, we live, and doing a man on the street interview. Like, what's more expensive, this car or a sewing machine? And of course, everybody's going to go, a car. And you're like, no, this is Lord's, are there more quilters in the United States or people in the state of Florida? There's more quilters in the United States. Oh my gosh. So we found these, crazy statistics.
Right.
And we had so much fun interviewing people. We were like, we should do this. How are we going to do this? So we decided, we decided we're going to do a YouTube show. As you do.
Why not, right?
Why not? 5 years ago, we're like, let's do a YouTube show. So literally, we sat down and we came up with, and it took us a while to figure out the format. And if you watch our first shows, which are still out there, you're kind of like, oh dear, they've learned.
I know when I look at my first videos, I'm like, who gave me a camera?
Yeah, exactly.
Why were they doing it?
I mean, and we filmed the first 2 years on my iPhone.
Yeah.
And Mike, of course, my husband, is into audio and all that kind of stuff. So he had and then we brought in 2 people that we knew that would help with production. So we have a production team now that, was with us with we film. And so we were doing 1 a month for the first year. And the second year, we're like, well, let's do 2.
Yeah.
So we record 2 episodes every month, and we release stuff now. And now it's crazy. It's crazy. We've been doing this. We're getting ready to start our 5th year. And we've done 0 advertising. We've got over 550 subscribers on YouTube. We've got over 500,000 downloads and views.
Isn't that crazy?
And it's just like, but we're very much in the marketplace. It's not right. Not that I don't talk about God. There are certain, you can watch episodes where I refer to quilts and say, this was a spiritual journey for me, and here's what the journey was. Mm-hmm. And I'm very open about that, but it's not about, I prayed about this fabric.
Right.
And God said, use it.
I think that's so important for all of us, because it's like I had to come to that place in my own journey where I began to really believe that God cared more that I created than what I created.
Right.
The very act of being in the studio, the very act of releasing creative expression through my life, that's what brings glory to Him. And anytime I would try to front load that with this sort of overt Christian metaphor, parentheses, not that there's anything wrong with that, and that sort of thing. But, anytime that I would try to struggle with this thing of, well, this is what this means, and this is what you should get out of this piece, and this is the process, it just kind of fell flat. But when I would just create and be in the studio with no agenda, then all of a sudden freedom is released, joy is released in me. People seem to find a place of connection in my work. And I think to me, that's the beauty of the creative process. And I think a lot of people get hung up with, well, does it have to be overtly Christian or not? And I'm like, no, you're a Christian. You love Jesus. Now go do something that's great that he can use and bring you abundant life through.
Well, exactly. And, we have patterns. We have over 25 patterns that are picked up by a distributor that are sold in local quilt stores. And so all this time we're doing this YouTube show, we're also establishing a brand of,
Right.
the Stitch TV show. And we're becoming personalities on that show. And then we have, we're backing that up with, patterns. Well, okay, our patterns are a part of our expression, but Pam and I from the very beginning decided that, how do we make our patterns stand out?
Right.
And so what we decided, and this is so us, what we decided is, we're going to provide a playlist of all music and videos that you should listen to and watch while creating this quilt, because we care about your entire quilting
the holistic experience. Right, exactly.
Like, so if you're in your room, you can put on these movies and it'll go with the theme of this quilt or whatever. And and they're all like 80s pop reference, pop culture stuff. So, and we just think that's hilarious. Nobody else is doing it. We think it's funny. And now people comment about it all the time. And it's funny about, you're established, and you've done this too with the Thriving Christian group on Facebook. You're establishing a community, and so there's this sense of, I'm relating to these people on a personal level about what they're passionate about.
Yeah.
And how do I encourage that? Like, I do take a lot of time to go, like, I read most of the comments. And I'm still at a place we can do that. I read most of the comments. I respond. We communicate with people. I emails back saying, "You're my first celebrity that answered my email." And I'm thinking, really? Like, that's crazy.
I'm just here in my quilt room looking at YouTube.
And people say that. They're like, I hang out with you because I listen to you while I quilt and I feel like I know you. And I'm like, because you've met me. I'm the exact same online as I am in real life person. And this is how I talk. And this is how I talk.
I love that when people come in the studio. I have people come in all the time and they'll come around the corner. And this lady the other day, she was like, oh my God, you're here. Yeah. And I'm like, okay. She's like, I just didn't think you'd be here. And I'm like, well, where do you think I'm at? I'm like, somebody's got to make the baskets. I mean, but I think because of the internet and all that, people think that you're something that you're not. And I love that. I think in particular about artists, the ones of us that are sharing our journey online, we're just regular people that are figuring this thing out and walking with Jesus just like you are, and have had the grace to be able to share that journey and hopefully share the potholes and the successes with others,
Well, hey there, it's Matt. And one of the things that I found over the years in working with artists is that real lasting change in our life happens best in the context of supportive Christian community. And that's why I wanted to take this opportunity just to take a second and invite you to be a part of my online community called the Thriving Christian Artists Facebook group. Listen, this group is absolutely free, and over the years has actually grown to thousands and thousands of artists in just about every creative medium from countries all over the world. The cool thing is that it's become a real place of encouragement and life for artists, just like you and me, who want to share their work, share their life, connect with other artists, and really pursue everything God has for us as artists in His kingdom. Now, listen, to join, all you have to do is just click the link in the show notes here and answer a couple of questions just to let us know that you're a real person, and bam, you're in, okay? So, listen, I can't wait to connect with you inside of my Thriving Christian Artists Facebook group. Do it now, and we'll see you there very soon. All right, bye.
Right. And it's not all about, saying on my show, Jesus loves you every day. I don't, that's not important. I mean, yes, that's important, but I'm talking like how I normally. So if something about God strikes me, I may say something about it.
Right.
We did this one episode about mindful quilting, and I was like, that makes a lot of sense to me. It's a big trend in the quilt world to do, and I guess it's not just quilt world, but the artisan community, to be mindful about your craft and take time and slow down and all that kind of stuff. And, and I was like, this made sense to me because I pray when I sew.
Yeah.
Like, there are sometimes I don't have any music, any videos on, anything. And I'm just I get into a zone of just praying for whatever
Right.
whatever's on my heart, I guess, that day.
Yeah.
So a part of the whole creative process is, my spiritual connection to Jesus and to God. And, oh, so this was really interesting. I mean, I love it.
Squirrel! Woo!
I know. I'm going to go off on a squirrel tangent. So I've been working on, and it's funny. Do you work on stuff and like God talks to you specifically about what that is and
Yeah.
why you're creating
Absolutely.
it?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I've been working on this quilt that's named Identity. And it's the Alice in Wonderland scene where the caterpillar is looking at over it, and Alice is going, looking at him over the mushroom, and the caterpillar says, "Who are you?"
Mm.
And Alice says, "I don't know, because I've changed a few times since this morning."
Mm.
And I felt like that's part of my spiritual journey of, I think every artist says, "Who am I?" And part of it is changing. And so I've spent the last, I don't know, 3 months really looking at identity and who I am and all that kind of stuff. And so I've been watching a lot of different stuff. And I watched Brene Brown, who I think is really interesting, did a special on Netflix about vulnerability.
Right.
And she made this statement that vulnerability is the birthplace of creativity.
Mm.
And then, I'm thinking about that for a while, and I'm like, wow, God, there's the law of first mention in the Bible. The first time
Right.
it's mentioned is what?
Sets
So,
the stage, right? Yeah.
right. So the very first verse of the Bible is, "In the beginning, God created."
Right.
So that's saying to me, God has been at the most vulnerable of who he is in the beginning is where creativity happens.
Right.
And out of vulnerability is the only place where we can experience true joy, which is different than happiness.
Right.
Totally different than happiness. And so, I've spent a lot of time thinking, okay, God, the more vulnerable I am in the creative process, the more I can experience joy.
And what does that mean for you, vulnerable? Because I think vulnerability, I'm thinking no expectations, laid on the line, willing to go with something even though I don't understand it, embrace the emotion of it, all of that. I mean, what does that mean for you, vulnerability, in that process?
I mean, it's embracing uncertainty. It's embracing risk. I mean, and as artisans, aren't we risking putting out there the work and creative stuff that we do?
Yeah. Yeah. That's good.
I mean, and I think that's a process, man.
Oh yeah.
Like, totally.
Well, it's a perfect lead into what we were talking about off camera, just kind of sharing before we got on, which is both of us in the last couple of years have walked through the death of our moms.
Right.
And that has, you don't ever know how that's going to affect the death of a parent, the death of a spouse or a loved one or whatever. You never know how that's going to affect you. And for both of us, it's had really profound effects on our creative journey. I mean, this is June, end of May, early June. We're recording this. My mom died at the end of September. And I was just saying earlier, I've had zero, I mean, no desire, willingness to be in the studio, no creative flow. I feel like everything that I've done has just been going through the motions. My sister, we were talking on the phone last night. She said, I feel the same thing. She's a pastry chef in Chicago, so we both make our living from
being creative
place of creative flow,
right.
and the ability to tap into that and let it flow through your life. And that's one of the biggest difficulties right now is learning how to be vulnerable and learning how to accept where you are. And at the same time, not disengage from the creative flow, even though it feels so different and so foreign in this season than it has in others.
And I think, my mother passed 5 years ago, so I've walked a little bit further in the journey, and just for the audience, Matt and I were both extremely close to our mothers.
Yeah.
I talk to my mother every day. You know, she was my best friend. And so her passing was really just a heart-wrenching, difficult thing. In fact, both our mothers knew each other and were friends. And so, yeah. But for me, because I was still working full-time in a corporate job when my mom passed, and I had to wear myself out physically almost to the point of, you know, exhaustion, before I allowed myself to rest.
Yeah.
And that's really a hard place to be at for my personality type. I really have a hard time not doing something. Like my husband will
The
say,
kingdom must advance, right? We got to get on with it.
oh my gosh.
Come on.
I just like I can't go to the beach and sit. Like I don't
Right.
understand that. Like
Right.
that doesn't, whereas my husband's like, just stay still. And I'm like, I can't stay still. We got to do something.
We're here. What are we doing? Right.
What are we doing? Let's make a plan. But okay, so for me, what I found, and it's a definitely a process, but what I found was I had to take things down to most basic, simple tasks that required no creativity, but were a step in that direction.
Yeah.
And as a quilter or fiber artist, sometimes that's just sewing 2 blocks together.
Right.
2 pieces of fabric together. And that that just and whether it was buying a kit that somebody else created and all I had to do was cut it out,
right,
and just and it's being in the creative world but not demanding the design, which is to me a whole different brainwave.
Right.
It's still keeping my hand in the creative and what brings me joy, but I'm struggling with. You know what I mean?
My sister said last night, she said everything that we did for, you know, because her world is kind of based around holidays. So she said everything that we, in pastry world, she said everything we did for Thanksgiving, Christmas, Valentine's Day this year, she said it was all repeats from years before. Usually she's kind of like me. She prides herself in these one-of-a-kind, really special creations never seen before.
Right.
And she said this year I just didn't have it. She said I did not have. She said I would work all day. She's at the you know, bakery shop at 4:00 in the morning, getting home at 6 in the afternoon. She said I'd come home and just fall apart some days, and then I'd eat dinner and go to bed and to come back in the next day. And I was like, I can totally relate. And she just kind of got into this rhythm of doing things that she had done before. With me, I would echo the same kind of thing. Is I'm just kind of in the process right now of repeating things I've done, staying in the process, not totally jettisoning that process from me, but just realizing that, you know, you can't expect too much from yourself in the grief process. And I think for what I'm hearing about your story, Lynn, and I would say this about mine, I think people underestimate the power of the longevity of your journey, because you will, I mean, we think about 20 years ago when we met, and then even before that when we both started our journey and what we're doing now, there have been ebbs and flows and seasons of ups and downs and seasons of inspiration, seasons of learning. And I think when people like look at my life or look at your life right now and they think, wow, they're living the dream, or I want to be doing that. It's like you're seeing one snapshot.
Oh my gosh. Yes. That's so true.
Of a little bit, you know, a little bitty picture of a journey. And it's not about that. You're just seeing one part of my journey right now.
Well, and you know, it's funny. There's a meme that's gone around in the quilting world with designers, quilt designers. And I think it's so true. Like every time I design a new quilt, it's the best idea I've ever had.
The anointing of new, right? That's what
it's awesome. It's incredible. It's going to be the best ever. And then you get into the design process where you have to start, you know, and I write patterns, which is difficult for me. It's not my favorite part of the process. So I struggle with that because I'm like, well, you just do it. It's like, cut it up. And my business partner, who's got a degree from Georgia Tech and is very, you know, engineering process focused, she's like, well, how do I cut it up?
Right.
And what's the, you know, the measurements and all that kind of stuff. Because I design without that and then go back and try to figure it out. She doesn't do it that way.
Right.
But so it's the best idea you ever have when you first start it. And then you're like, oh, okay, this could be tough. And then you go through the process, or you're still in this journey of, oh my God, who thought of this? Like, this is awful. And then it's the worst idea I've ever had. And then I can't believe I'm still working on this. And then it's like, oh God, when is this ever going to be done? There's a deadline.
Right.
I've got to get this to the publisher, at a certain time. And then you come on the other side and you start seeing the light and you're like, wait a minute.
Right.
This is good. Like, this has got some quality to it. And I think that's part of all of our journeys in that, oh God, I love you. This is amazing. This is so great. I get to create. It's wonderful. And they're like, oh wait, this work.
Hold on.
And it doesn't matter what, your favorite part of the process is. Everybody's got a part of your creative world that you're like, I hate doing that.
Yeah.
Whether it's marketing or the bills or, I hate binding.
Right.
Lord, I hate binding. It's not my favorite part of the quilt process. But guess what? It doesn't get done unless I do the binding.
Right. Well, and for all of us, I think your willingness to push through those ugly parts or the parts that you don't like, or your willingness to push through the seasons of non-inspiration,
Absolutely.
That ability, that grit really defines people that will, I think, be able to step into the fullness that God has for them in the creative realm and in life, or people that will remain being paralyzed. And I see that all the time in the mentoring program or at conferences or whatever. You see people that they had a hiccup in their life or they had a trauma in their life or one thing, and that thing shut them down.
Right.
And it's like, it doesn't have to be that way. I think the more, we were also talking about the power of community earlier, just before we got on here, but I think it's our willingness to invest our lives in others who can look at us and say, you know what, I know you think this defines you right now. I know you think this sucks. I know you think you're never going to get over this, but you are, and I'm going to walk with you in it. And as you do, you build authority and strength for the next leg of the journey.
And okay, so I'm going to be super vulnerable here, but
it's the theme of the day.
I think this is important to point out. So my husband and I have walked through infertility for 20 years. We wanted to have children and all that kind of stuff. Which is, if you've ever walked through that, it is a tough road. That being said, the thing that helped me walk through that huge pain of not being able to have children and losing it. We had an ectopic. We lost a child in 2000. And this is right before I met Matt. The thing with that is, when I was able to give back to other people who were being blessed with children and able to give into that, like we were at that season, you go through seasons of life where everybody's getting married, everybody's having kids, everybody's, whatever, their kids are graduating high school and stuff. When you're able to give into that place where you're lacking, you will find more peace about your issue. And that to me is community.
That's so good.
Because I can still celebrate someone else's child and not have one of my own and be totally at peace that that's not what God has for me.
Yeah. But
that's what God has for them. And I choose to celebrate that. And let me say, the first time was the roughest. We lost a baby, had an ectopic, had surgery. And literally 2 weeks after that surgery, I had to be at a baby shower for my sister-in-law. So it's kind of like, and I think when you look at a creative journey, if you've been knocked down, you need to find a way. And man, it's hard. And I do not, oh God, it's tough. It's tough. But if you can find a way to pour into someone else out of your loss or pain or however you've been knocked down, if you can find a way to care about somebody else, bitterness will not find root in you.
That's good. That's good.
And that's how you get back up.
Yeah.
Is you get your eyes off you and your stuff, and you go, okay, God, how can I bless somebody else, encourage somebody else, celebrate someone else, support someone else? How can I do that with your love? Because what you're going to get back is so much more valuable because you've cared about somebody else. And that's community. That's so key in
That's
getting
good.
back up.
Yeah, absolutely. Wow. This has been rich.
We should do this again.
I know. It's like, this is good stuff. I think it's like somebody said to me the other day, Matt, I love when you talk about your garden, because it's such a metaphor for life. And I think, God is always speaking through every season.
Absolutely.
Every season, every trial, every up, every down, every experience of our life, he's speaking, and he's trying to show us the reality of the kingdom, trying to show us the reality of us maturing and growing in him. And it's been an honor all these years, Lynn, to love you guys and to walk with you guys and to see the Lord blooming and blossoming in your life. I know others are going to want to connect with you on social media and on YouTube and that sort of thing to see the stitch. So what's the best place for people to continue that journey with you?
Okay, so you can watch all of our shows, which there's like 500 hours of content out there at thestitchtvshow.com, or we're on YouTube, The Stitch TV Show. We're also on Instagram, The Stitch TV Show.
I'm hearing a pattern.
Yeah, there's a pattern. We're on Facebook, The Stitch TV Show. We have a brand. If you want to connect with me directly, it's Lynn Rinehart. I'm on Facebook. On Instagram, I'm Cotton Art Studio.
Awesome.
So that's where you would find me on Instagram.
And we'll put the links to all of those all in the show notes so that people can click easily on those and get them. So.
And we post stuff every week. If you're a quilter or fiber artist, we talk about quilting and all that kind of stuff. We post every week, twice a week. We have videos and tips, and we talk about quilting a lot. A lot.
In fact, before we came on, Lynn was joking. She was like, we talked for 45 minutes the other day about thread, and we didn't finish.
Right. Yeah. I can talk a lot about quilting.
Nerd alert. We all do it, right?
Oh, and we also have classes online. So we've got classes that you can link to. If you want a great beginner quilt class, it's out there on our website. Yeah. Well, and patterns and merchandise and whatever. All kinds of stuff.
Awesome. Well, Lynn Rinehart, thank you so much for being on the podcast today. It's been such a great time to reconnect and hear you share your heart.
All right. Thank you, Bad Tommy. And we do need to do this again because we could talk more.
Absolutely.
All right.
Hey, thanks so much for spending a few minutes with me today on the podcast. Listen, I hope it's been a huge encouragement to you on your journey as an artist. Hey, also, before you leave, make sure to hit the subscribe button so you don't miss any of the other episodes of the Thriving Christian Artist podcast. And also, be sure to connect with me on Facebook, Instagram, or at my website, which is matttommymentoring.com. Until next time, remember, you were created to thrive. Bye-bye.